Very good afternoon. Well, it was the worst kept secret in football, but the speed of the appointment has come as a surprise. Erik Ten Hag is the sixth manager to take the hot seat at Old Trafford since Sir Alex Ferguson retired in 2013. The club in the last hour has announced the Ajax boss has signed a deal from the end of this season until June 2025 with the option to extend for a further year. Ten Hag himself has had this to say: "It's a great honour to be appointed manager of Manchester United, and I'm hugely excited by the challenge ahead. I know the history of this great club and the passion of the fans, and I'm absolutely determined to develop a team capable of delivering the success they deserve." It'll be difficult to leave Ajax after these incredible years, and I can assure our fans of my complete commitment and focus on bringing this season to a successful conclusion before I move to Manchester United. Well, John Murtaugh, football director, has said during the past 4 years at Ajax, Erik has proved himself to be one of the most exciting and successful coaches in Europe, renowned for his team's attractive attacking football and commitment to youth. In our conversations with Erik leading up to this appointment, we were deeply impressed with his long-term vision for returning Manchester United to the level we want to be competing at, and his drive and determination to achieve that. We wish Erik the best of luck as he focuses on achieving a successful end to the season at Ajax, and look forward to welcoming him to Manchester United this summer. Well, our chief reporter, Kaveh Solhekol, joins us now. I guess the question is, we now know that it is Ten Hag. Why is it Ten Hag?
Well, we have been given a little bit of an insight into the recruitment process at United and what happened behind the scenes. Now, the recruitment process was led by the Director of Football, John Murtaugh, and also the Technical Director, Darren Fletcher, the former United midfielder. And during the end of that process, the CEO, Richard Arnold, was also involved and engaged. Now, we're being told that Erik Ten Hag was the unanimous choice after what is being called a rigorous process. United respect all the candidates who were considered for the job, but at the end of the day, they felt that Erik Ten Hag was the right man at the right time to take on this big challenge. And the reason they were impressed with him during the interviews that they had was that they felt that his idea and his vision was closely aligned with Manchester United's identity and also the strategy that United have going forward. Now, some of the reasons they were attracted to him and they chose to give him the job: the fact that he is a proven winner. We've seen his record at Ajax. He's won multiple titles and cups. Also, the way his sides play. Very attractive, attacking, pressing football. The kind of way we're used to seeing Manchester United play in the old days. Also, his commitment to youth. Obviously, Ajax famous throughout the world for the way they bring through young players. That is something that he's done in the past 4 years in Amsterdam. And also the fact that he improves players, he develops players. We've seen some players arrive at Old Trafford and they almost go backwards. They're not as good as they used to be at their previous clubs. Erik Ten Hag is a hands-on coach. He's somebody who can work closely with players to improve them and develop them. So those are some of the reasons why Manchester United have decided to go for Erik Ten Hag. I would, though, say that it is a bit of a risk. We know that Mauricio Pochettino, for instance, the former Spurs manager who's now at PSG, he is somebody who was on the United shortlist as well. Everybody knows the great job he did at Southampton, the great job he did at Spurs as well. I think if they'd gone for Pochettino, they would have got somebody who has experience of managing in the Premier League and also managing a big club in the Premier League. I think the risk with Ten Hag is that he doesn't have that Premier League experience. But we weren't in the interviews. I wasn't in the interviews. I didn't see and listen to the presentation that he gave. Everybody knows that he's a fantastic coach, but he does have something to prove at United, and he's got something to prove in the Premier League as well.
What do we make of the timing of everything? Because we thought we might just be waiting until Ten Hag makes sure that he focuses on cup competition. Of course, he was in the final at the weekend against PSV, who they lost to. They're ahead of them in the title now, hoping to win the Dutch league. And then Manchester United suffer this humiliating defeat to Liverpool. And then suddenly, this news is announced.
I think I know what you're getting at. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you'll be saying that this announcement has been rushed out to give United some positive PR. We also saw the performance against Liverpool. That was an atrocious performance. The headlines that have followed from that, what everybody's been saying about not just the United players, but also the club, the structure of the club, the way it's being run. So you could look at this and say, well, this is very convenient for Manchester United to rush this out, to move the agenda on so that people are not talking about what happened at Anfield, but people are talking about the future. I think the timing of it is not ideal from Ajax's point of view because, as you mentioned, they've still got 5 games to go. They're top of the table. They're trying to win the league again, but they have released a very gracious statement in the last few minutes, thanking Erik Ten Hag for the work that he's done. Also, I think behind the scenes, they would admit that it's very difficult when Manchester United come calling for anybody to turn around and say no. But the timing, I don't think, is perfect. It suits Manchester United, of course, from a PR point of view. But also, I think if things had been going well with Ralf Rangnick, if the team had been playing well, if it looked like the team were going to qualify for the Champions League, then I'm sure United would have wanted to keep this under wraps until the season was finished.
OK, Kaveh, stay right there because we'll come back to you just shortly. We are going to hear from a man who knows Erik Ten Hag very well indeed. He is the Dutch football expert, Marcel van der Kraan, who joins us live from Amsterdam now. Thank you very much for speaking with us. I just want to first ask, just what have you made of the timing of this?
Well, this is ideal for Ajax and Ajax fans because if this was going on any longer, I think the pressure from the players, from the fans would have been huge on Erik Ten Hag. Ajax have not been playing very well. Maybe a coincidence, maybe not. Since the news broke out that Manchester United wanted Erik Ten Hag. And of course, as it is in England, big news, it is big news in Holland. Ajax is our most popular, our biggest club in the Netherlands, most successful club. And if the manager gets approached, well, that has consequences. They have to look for a new manager, there's unrest. And as what was just said, they still have a title to play for. They lost the Dutch Cup very unexpectedly, under the pressure, under the circumstances, and now they cannot risk losing this Dutch title in the next few weeks.
They can't, and how will it go down with the Ajax fans? What do you think they're going to be feeling about it all right now, having not quite won the league yet?
Well, Ajax fans are just hoping that Erik Ten Hag will do what he's good at, and that is creating a really good football team on the pitch, playing really attacking football. That is what they were happy with over the last few years. Ten Hag was the man who created attacking football, kind of Dutch total football in the Champions League. And that is what bowled everybody over. It wasn't so much his results in Holland, because if you're Ajax and you have the most amount of money, like Manchester United used to have, it is easier to win the league. But in Europe, that was so impressive. And I think if he can carry on like this till the end of the season, they will say, thank you, Erik, for the time. But we can understand that if a big club, a club of the size of Manchester United, comes knocking on your door, we can understand that you go there. He was an assistant under Steve McLaren, as we can see here, before in Holland. But now the roles are reversed. Erik is the big man. And there were rumours that Steve would join him. But I don't think that is happening, from what I hear on this side in Holland. And it's more important for him to have his own kind of staff, the Dutch guys around him who he works with at Ajax, because that will add to the football style and the identity he wants to bring to Old Trafford.
Now, we saw Liverpool hammering United 4-0 on Tuesday night. If you look back over the 2 games, I mean, 9-0 on aggregate. Does he accept this as a huge challenge when after that game, Ralf Rangnick said, I think we're, 6 years behind Liverpool?
Well, and this is exactly where I have my fears for a Dutch manager going in. A man with the reputation of Louis van Gaal, big in Europe, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, successful everywhere, in Holland, of course, as well. He could not turn it around at Manchester United. If you see the gap between the club and Manchester City in the other end of the town and Liverpool a little bit further away, the gap at this moment is huge. Can you restore that within one season? I don't think so. The kind of football Erik Ten Hag will want to bring requires a lot of training sessions, a lot of intensity from the players, intense training programs, because it's a kind of style which I don't think has been seen before until Pep Guardiola came to England. And Pep Guardiola wasn't successful straight away, so I hope for Erik Ten Hag that the club and the fans will give him that time.
You mentioned Pep Guardiola there. Of course, he worked with Pep Guardiola, of course, in the past, didn't he, at Bayern Munich? Would you say that that's the kind of style that he also has? He's been described as well as sort of a mini Pep, hasn't he?
Absolutely. A mini Pep, that's maybe a good way to pronounce it or to name it. But he was, of course, a fan of Johan Cruyff. And that's where Erik Ten Hag's dedication has been in football. I want to have that same style, that attacking football, 4-3-3, not something with 3 defenders, 5 defenders, all that complicated stuff is not his style. He plays the Dutch way. The Dutch way was always Cruyff's way, and the Cruyff way became the Pep Guardiola way. And when Erik met at Bayern Munich, his idol at that moment, Pep Guardiola, who has, really carried on the legacy of Johan Cruyff, I think that was kind of everything coming together. It was a dream to work with him, he once said, and he bounced all his ideas off him, and I would be so surprised if he's not going to have the same kind of methods, the same training regime at Carrington, at Old Trafford, in the games as well, this style. If he's not going to do that, I would be surprised. It will be the Erik Ten Hag way right from the start.
In Man United's statement, they said that, they were very impressed about his long-term vision for the club. He's going to need time to build, isn't he? But how did he build it at Ajax, and what do you think he can take from that and bring to Manchester United and implement here?
Well, there's one thing he didn't have at Ajax, and which is not always required in his eyes: superstars. Ajax was a team with young players, players even who came back from the Premier League. If we look at Steven Berghuis, Daley Blind, Dusan Tadic, none of them were really big stars in the Premier League, but they all fitted in his playing style, in his fluid rotation on the pitch, in the games, and that is what he will want to implement in that team and in that squad of Manchester United. If they don't give him the biggest stars in the world, that will not worry him. But of course, if you look at the competition at Manchester City, at Chelsea, at Liverpool, those big clubs, they have an absolute huge budget. And he cannot say to Manchester United, I'm happy with a couple of players from Ajax who I might bring along, if he does. And he will require top quality, but it's not a man who will be depending on Cristiano Ronaldo alone.
And what kind of style do you think Manchester United fans will be seeing at Old Trafford?
Well, his ideal style, I know, is playing on the opponent's half, and that is a major shock maybe to the defenders, and the defence has been part of the criticism at Old Trafford already, but I think that will probably be the biggest change for them. They have to defend with 50 yards behind them. They have to defend knowing that they will be the build-up in part of the attack already from the halfway line, and I think if it works, it's a really exciting style. But that has been happening in Holland a lot of times. People have seen it. They like it. But in the Premier League, he will have real big battles every week. And for Erik Ten Hag, that is a new ground. It's a place where he's never been, where he's never played, never worked as a manager, I mean. And, what is going to happen to him there? Is that going to give him the results? Because at United, he needs results right from the start. You can't say, I need a year and I'll finish in the top 10. That's not good enough for United fans. And I think that will be his biggest challenge.
What about the challenge of bringing players to United that fit his style and dealing with the transfer market that is very, very different to that of the Dutch league? Ralf Rangnick said they need as many as 10 players.
I think one of the criticisms of the Ajax fans has been that he might have been distracted by United because, of course, if you know you're going to work there, apart from the Ajax games, he will deny it, of course, to us in the media here in Holland, but he will be focusing on every United game every week. He will have looked at the game against Liverpool. He will just have been as much shocked as he was, as all the other fans were. But then again, at Ajax, he started right from scratch. He built it up. He sorted his playing style out first. And once he had that, he wanted acquisitions, new players. I think the most he spent was probably £16 million on a player. And that was Sebastian Haller coming from West Ham United. And everybody said, look, what can he do? He's not pulled any trees over in London and in the Premier League. And yet he's now the top scorer of Ajax, top scorer in the Champions League, in that style of Erik. And I think that's where you have to give him the credit and the time. But of course, it's going to be a really, really hard job right from the beginning, especially knowing he likes to spend time on the training pitch. And yet, I think after 4 days starting in the job, he flies away to the other end of the world on one of those, commercial tours, as Louis van Gaal calls it.
They are great fun, by the way, but how much fun is he going to have at sort of asserting his authority? Is he a strong character, the type of man that is not afraid to make big decisions and stick with it?
Well, he's certainly not afraid to make these big decisions. On Sunday, we saw that in the Dutch Cup final. He left his top scorer, Sebastian Haller, the man I just mentioned, he left him out. It was a shock to everyone, but he thought that was the right thing to do, and he wasn't afraid to make that call. It didn't work out for him this time, but in all the other occasions in the Champions League where he had to make big decisions, yes, he made some big calls there. He shocked players, he put players on the bench, and he really doesn't shiver. And maybe it's been mentioned before, but the fact that he's so financially independent, he's gone into football to follow his ideas, his dreams, without having to worry about a financial future where other managers might compromise. They might do the things owners want, directors want, give in to the demands. Well, Erik Ten Hag will not do that. He puts the tracksuit on, he works with the players, and if you're not happy with that, just tell me, but I want to do it my way.
Just a one-word answer here. Is he going to be a success at Manchester United? Yes or no?
Look at my face. It's a hard one. It's a really hard one. No Dutch manager has ever turned things around at a big English Premier League club in the history, the whole history. And if he will do it, it will be almost a miracle, because it's such a different world from, the Dutch league and the continent, where, clubs know how to survive. But in England, it's a massive battle with all the big ones.
We are breaking down all the details about Erik Ten Hag's appointment at Manchester United. They released a statement saying he will take over as first-team manager from the end of this season up until June 2025. We've been getting reaction from the Netherlands. We're going to be heading to Old Trafford very shortly as well. Just your reaction, I guess, to the man that they've appointed when you look at his pedigree. We know he had this outstanding interview at Manchester United, and we've heard from some people it was almost like he was interviewing Manchester United. But why him from what he's done in his career?
Well, I think you have to look at 3 years ago, 2019. That was really the key season as far as Erik Ten Hag was concerned. And that was the key season when he almost burst onto the scene, onto the European scene, and started being linked with big jobs. And the reason behind that was that he had this incredible young Ajax team. It had players like De Ligt, De Jong, Van der Beek, Ziyech playing for them. And they had an incredible run in the Champions League. If you remember, they went to Real Madrid. They won 4-1 at the Bernabeu. They beat Juventus in Turin. They won 1-0 at Spurs, and then they had that incredible semi-final, Champions League semi-final against Spurs in Amsterdam when they were leading 2-0, and they ended up losing that game 3-2, and Spurs got to the final. Later in 2019 also, I remember being at Stamford Bridge. They came to play Chelsea. Incredible performance. They raced into a 4-1 lead at Stamford Bridge, ended up drawing that game 4-4. So that is when he really started to be talked about. And it is what United have been looking at, his European pedigree, what he has achieved in the Champions League with a club who don't have the resources and the finances of the big hitters in the Champions League. He's done a great job. So that was the time when he was really being started to be talked about and being linked with the big jobs. It's interesting, of course, because on that occasion, in that semi-final in Amsterdam, he was ultimately outwitted by Mauricio Pochettino, the other leading candidate for this job. And I know United making it clear that as far as they were concerned, Ten Hag was the unanimous choice. But I think Pochettino would have been very, very close to getting this job as well. Not for the first time, of course. He's been linked with the United job on previous occasions as well.
Yeah, why do you think they sort of put him to one side, I guess, considering that they have courted him on a couple of occasions, and he has the Premier League experience that Ten Hag doesn't have?
Well, from the sort of noises coming out of Old Trafford, although, of course, they're not going to speak at all about whether they interviewed Mauricio Pochettino or not, or whether he was one of the candidates. We know that he was one of the leading candidates. But I think as far as United are concerned, they had a rigorous process and they think that Erik Ten Hag is the best man for the job going forward. Now, another way of looking at it as well is that Ten Hag is easier to get at the moment from Ajax. I think the compensation that they have to pay to Ajax is something like £2 million.
So he's cheaper?
He's cheaper. His wages are probably less than what Mauricio Pochettino would want as well. Of course, Mauricio Pochettino has a job at the moment at PSG, and he manages some of the best players in the world, Mbappe, Neymar, those kind of players. But it looks like Mauricio Pochettino may be leaving Paris in the summer, and I think a lot of people, a lot of United fans would say that maybe Pochettino would have been a better choice. But I think Erik Ten Hag is more somebody who's got something to prove. And obviously, in his interviews with Manchester United, United have seen that. They've seen that he's a very, very driven individual, and he is somebody who can rise to this challenge. Let's not underestimate how big this job is, because it's not just sorting out the football side. He's going to have to manage upwards as well. We've heard a lot about the Glazer ownership of the club, the fact that it was bought in a leveraged buyout, the fact that United are still paying off the debts associated with the Glazers' takeover of the club. So he has to manage upwards as well, not just the players. And I don't think he will ever have managed players as high profile as some of the players he's going to see in the United dressing room when he arrives in the summer.
Provided he keeps them there, of course, as well. But what about the hierarchy at Manchester United and the Glazers and the way that the club is run? How do you think the relationship is going to be? Because a lot of these other managers have really struggled with that. What could be a difference here? How do you play that?
Let's listen to what Louis van Gaal, a former Manchester United manager, said. He basically said that United are not a football club. They are a business. We've also heard lots of reports saying that Jurgen Klopp, when United were interested in appointing him, he didn't really want to go to Manchester United because he felt that they were more of a business than a football club. So that is something that Erik Ten Hag has to deal with as well. But everything we know about him, he is a coach. He's somebody who wants to be on the training ground with the players. That's where he feels comfortable. But of course, I think at United, I think the first thing he's going to notice is the staggering amount of interest in United. He will not know what he's let himself in for when he arrives at Carrington, when he goes on the pre-season tour of Australia. Again, I don't think that's perfect preparation. I don't think if it was left to him, he'd be wanting to go to the other side of the world.
Austria instead of Australia.
Yeah, he'd probably prefer a nice training camp in Austria. But unfortunately, well, from United's point of view, fortunately, and from the point of view of their fans in Australia, that is where they are going. But I think a lot of other managers have found it difficult to work under the sort of structure that is in place at United. Of course, if you speak to people at United, they will say, we're a football club, we're not a business. The most important thing is winning on the pitch. But just my own personal experience of dealing with clubs, when I deal with clubs like Liverpool or Manchester City or even Chelsea, not dealing with them, but just being around them and seeing the way they operate, they are clubs that are just 1,000,000% geared towards winning on the pitch. That is all that matters to them, winning on the pitch. They're very single-minded about that pursuit, pursuing football excellence on the pitch. And perhaps that has been missing from United in the past few seasons. That is something that Erik Ten Hag is going to have to grapple with as well.